Okay, stream's turning on.
Okay, yeah. All right, got it up.
Okay, so how did it go?
Yeah, fine, I think. I've nearly finished this part, but there's a few lines at the end where I've just put to-dos to break it up and indicate what I hadn't done. I imagine we'll probably have enough for this session, depending on how quickly we get through it.
Okay, did you go through much more of the Luli stuff? Or did you just focus on RSP?
I got a little bit of that done, but not too much. I had some tax and other stuff that I sort of put off. So, yeah, didn't manage time particularly well. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't find it particularly difficult, I think, to analyze it, though it is a decently different tone to Luli's one. There's a lot more like relative social status stuff or self-aggrandizement was a big one.
Yeah.
I did record, so I haven't done it on many of them. There was a little thing at the top, but any of the sort of claims or points I wasn't sure about, I tried to add a bit of a confidence interval to.
Okay.
So there's a few paragraphs and one sentence with a confidence thing.
Okay, so it starts out, thinks Lily's piece is dead on, and then the second sentence I think is relevant. What that means, he says the quote from Berner is verbose and largely incorrect. Which I do not think is an accurate summary of what Lily said.
No, in terms of an expansion, it's sort of missing the point. I also noticed that, like, the quotation itself is, if anything, less verbose than it should be in that it omits some stuff that's important. The quotation itself is not largely incorrect, though there are errors with it, but he means like
Yeah, he
the
means the
extract
material
or
in
the essay. So
I
that's
know.
just sort of careless. But yeah, I mean, so I expand on that in the next thing where I think it would raise like hypocrisy and conflicts if he sort of said something more accurate in like criticize the academies particularly. But I'm not familiar with his writing, so I've sort of hedged that because I didn't go and check.
Okay, so let's see what you say. This comment, sort of comment and phrasing, doesn't need to have bad social stuff, but he's doing it.
Yeah, in the sense that, like, like as a comment, I think Eliot's comments on blah are accurate, like, is not necessarily a social thing. But in this context, it's got extra meaning.
Right, you can just refer to text and mention the author as a way to indicate which text you're talking about. That is
Yep.
not what he's doing.
No. It's more necessary here because he's doing a top post as well, as opposed to a threaded reply, which I thought was a bit interesting.
Isn't his comment nested under Luli's on Facebook?
Nope.
Is it not?
So it's actually, I'll move that out of the way.
Oh, I see.
So
That's kind of odd.
yeah, if we refresh, one of the reasons that it's easy to notice, if we refresh, it's actually off the bottom where it says view one more comment.
Yeah.
He doesn't reply to anything else, and he doesn't reply in any of the threaded things.
Okay, so he didn't use quoting or threading.
Yep. The lack of quoting is I didn't mention that, but it's worse because he's not replying in a thread. Whereas like if it was threaded and better threaded, so say something like less wrong, then it's more okay to, or it's less of an issue not quoting depending on what you're saying. But he actually like responds to particular sort of parts or claims in the text or things that he claims are claims, which I think largely doesn't work out. But yeah, it's like deliberately excluding quoting there is makes it a pretty
I don't think
casual sort of thing at best.
he may not really know how or be any good at it. I think that could be part of what's going on.
I mean, the original post is not very good at it either, but at least the guy tried. Well, he didn't have anything else to say, but yeah, it's I don't think not being good at it is. I mean, he does sort of quote some particular words, like entrenched is one that he quotes with actual quote marks. So, but I think that might be the only quote in there. I mean, he uses quotes around safe space at the end, but that's not in there in the extract. Yeah.
I'm just checking the emails from him. Where are they?
Is that from him or about him?
From him on Critical Cafe.
Okay.
Yeah, like here's one that quotes absolutely nothing while responding to me. Dear Elliot, I've just had a look at your review. No link to the review, no quote of my email, no quote from the review.
Which, if he's being
Yeah,
critical of it,
I
is
just looked through and all of his emails are like this. He's literally the founder and moderator of a Yahoo group, apparently. But he has no idea how quoting on Yahoo groups works. Yeah, none of his
yeah.
emails quote. He doesn't get it at all.
Um, yeah. Anyway, I'm discussing those emails, I guess, isn't the point.
Yeah, my point was just that, yeah, he actually doesn't know how to quote.
Yep.
Which is weird because the Critical Cafe group, most of the members do know how to quote. Lots of the discussions use quoting. And so he never noticed what everyone else was doing.
Hmm. Or didn't care about it enough to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something bad there.
Yeah, I agree.
Multiple other threads he doesn't reply to. It's also reply to OP, not to Lily's comment.
So Facebook's thing, I feel like, is like a reason that maybe people might do that. Like it's pretty terrible in general, but I think it's still significant enough to mention. Facebook still has threading, to a degree. It still has like the ability to reply to Luli. But he's making what it means is that he's making us, and it's worded like this as well. He's making a statement generally to people as opposed to like a direct reply to what Lulu's saying as a reply.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
non-critical. Yeah. Well,
So I've realized like should have known better is I feel like a pretty common thing in terms of like mistakes and um, where dishonesty can sort of, well, the refusal to acknowledge that you should have known better sort of thing. Like it's a fairly common sort of theme. Um, Anyway, I use it a bunch there, but I've been thinking about it just as a deeper part of dishonesty, I guess. Which I know in your essay about lying mentions, yeah, there's the common lies everyone thinks of as that, but then there's the what should you know, and that has to line up with like what you're projecting, as well as oh, there's another thing. Anyway, but yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, so
it's
I've used
hard
it
to
fairly
say
frequently.
that he should know better. It depends how you look at it. So I think you're saying he has a reputation for being skilled. Therefore, according to his reputation, he should know better. But in actuality, he doesn't have much skill. So it would be hard for him to know better, maybe, given his skill. But on the other hand, he should have developed skill and didn't.
I think it's so I agree with that, but I think like particularly here what I'm meaning is so all of that, all of the highlighted part is one clause. So I think what I'm saying is like he should have known better than to like carte blanche agree with what Luli said. Um like as someone who's like projecting himself as like an expert at critical rationalism, um it's oddly like he's saying like I completely agree with everything that Luli has said, which feels like I mean, obviously we've analyzed that, so there's a bit of context there, but just in general, it feels out of place for this sort of thing.
Yeah, whether it feels out of place depends on your point of view and your expectations. I think he's from subcultures where this is normal, and they're like social climber subcultures, and that's bad. And this is evidence of what type of person he is and that he's not truth seeking and so on. Because
Yep.
it shows the type of people he's used to dealing with and how he expects them to read what he says and so on.
Yep.
See, this is a CR form. Means something very different to you than I think to the entire membership of the forum.
Yeah. Okay. Um, like I've got higher standards on the thing as opposed to like, I mean, like uh, a title like Critical Cafe deliberately puts forward like a casual, like a more casual thing, as opposed to just the Facebook page called Critical Rationalism. So there's yeah potential for a decent amount of ambiguity there. I'm also not aware of the um, like the social standards type thing or the norms that have been set in place for this or that have developed for that forum.
Oh, yeah, the norms include banning me for being a fan of Ayn Rand, lying about the moderation policies, and it being owned by Matt Diogardi, who misquoted me on the group Critical Rationalism blog and then absolutely refused to fix it, so I left the blog.
I was actually wondering about that because I saw like 2 days ago or something. I saw you had a post on there from like 2010. Um, there
Yeah.
was it was to do with critical preferences. There was links back and forward. Um, and I tried to go look through the post history, but it's actually really hard to find the post history on that forum or on that like community blog. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what the archive navigation's like there.
I didn't look too much into it, but a few minutes wasn't enough to be able to find much than the last like 4 posts, which were all made in like a few days of each other. It seemed like some essay this guy was just quoting parts of,
Well, the other
or that
thing he
he'd
did
written.
was he shut down a critical rationalist Yahoo group um, because he didn't want to run it anymore. And he refused to give it to me or let anyone just like leave it active with no moderation or something, and decided to just, disable it instead.
Oh, wow, okay. Was it like just an archive type thing? So from that point on, it was like read only, or was it like totally deleted or inaccessible after that?
No, they just stopped accepting new posts.
Okay.
And then also Verizon bought Yahoo and deleted all archives for all groups. So, but that's not
Yeah.
his fault.
I can't imagine they really took up that much space if they were just text, so that's odd.
I do
But
not think they took that much space. I do not think that was the issue.
yeah.
Not a Reddit discussion. Yeah, but they were on Facebook. I think Facebook is worse than Reddit.
Uh, yeah. I guess this is in the I mean like I guess what I should have said is something like it's not a random discussion on some subreddit, um, or a discussion on some random subreddit, like as in uh the general, or just any other Facebook page there. So that's probably an inappropriate reference to Reddit. But the second part of the
I see,
sentence
about a
is more
restaurant or the
meaning.
movies. Yeah, it's supposed to be an intellectual forum, sort of, but I think the fact that it's on Facebook is a giveaway that it's not, and discussion standards on Facebook are broadly worse than on Reddit.
Yeah, yeah. Reddit has definitely better threading and navigation and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think the bigger issue is the community more than the software.
Yeah,
The Reddit community is more intellectual than the Facebook community.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
And that doesn't just apply like on average, it seems to apply to like every single philosophy Facebook group I've ever tried to use were consistently awful, and I refuse to try Facebook anymore.
Yep.
Okay, his inappropriate of
Oh, sorry,
tone.
that's an editing mistake.
Yeah.
Um,
Inappropriate tone is projecting low effort. Law of least effort, not carelessness. We'll see more of this mismatch throughout the post. Yeah, it does come off pretty low effort socially. Like, he's not really paying much attention to the details of what Lily said. He's acting kind of superior about it. I agree with that. Quotation isn't verbose, stuff was omitted, largely incorrect. He means that the essay stuff. Yeah, okay. That's a fairly minor thing. People, that's like a common sort of minor writing issue.
yeah, the reason I probably shouldn't have put that last thing in parentheses. But that was like the reason that I mentioned it particularly.
Yeah, extract might be a subculture thing or a continent thing or something because it seems like a weird, uncommon word to me.
I have used it throughout this. Like, I don't commonly use it. If like I imagine that it might be used in publishing and stuff a lot more, but I've used it throughout this because it's easier to talk about the extract as opposed to the quote, because uh, because it's easy to talk about the content of the extract essentially. Um, like if
Yeah,
he said
I don't know
like
if I see
Jack,
the difference. There's an extract with content, there's a quote with content.
um, because if I said like what was the name of the guy here at the top? Like Frederick's quote as opposed to Frederick's extract. Um, I think the ownership of quote is more acceptable than the ownership of extract in that, like, you can say it's an extract from Berner's essay, and it's a quote of Berner's essay, but to say that it's Frederick's quote is, I think, yeah, sort of makes sense, whereas Frederick's extract doesn't, and that's why that's the only major difference that I think I see, or that I've seen between them.
A short passage taken from a piece of writing. So, yeah, Frederick's extract would be a short passage that he took from a piece of writing. I think it works basically the same as quote.
Fair enough. Maybe the like quotation slash extraction is part of why I'm reading that.
Okay, so he says verbose, sort of true. Prolix.
Needlessly wordy is roughly the definition.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tediously lengthy.
Yeah, Burner could be a better writer, but I don't think RSP's in a good position to complain about that. Non-specific. Yeah, verbose means long, which isn't really the main issue with the writing style. It's more that it's like dense and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's even like it's more nuanced than long in that, like, to call beginning of infinity verbose, I feel is reasonably inaccurate because it's also quite concise. I think those two things are reasonably seen as like opposite ends of a single spectrum.
Yeah, David's a better writer than most people.
Hmm.
I think this word should be outlined.
Oh yeah, that's a typo on my part.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense then. So you outlined it and you weren't able to cut a lot of words out, so it doesn't seem that verbose to you. The number of words matches the content.
Yep.
Project expertise. Oh, like he's signaling that he's in a position to judge it. He's an
Yep.
expert who can declare what it's like.
Without really explaining it or anything else, it's just the weight of his word alone is enough.
Yeah,
That's
by saying this, he implies we should actually like listen to him or care what he says or something.
Yep. It is authoritative in some way. I usually don't spend too much time mentioning either like projecting expertise or self-aggrandizement, just because it's pretty common throughout his reply.
Okay, so in what way is it incorrect? He gives us something. He grants that a lot of critical rationalists are introverted, but many aren't. Which, similar to Lully, he's not getting the point of what Berner said, which was not just about introversion or extroversion.
Yeah. I mentioned somewhere that the argument isn't really addressing anything from um, Berner's piece. It might be further down.
Yeah, he's bragging that he's extroverted.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think bragging might be. I don't think anything I pointed out there is bragging. Like that's an additional point there.
Well, it's relative social status elevation. Means he's saying his way, extroverted, is better than their way, don't get out much.
Yep.
Like he's making a
Um,
comparison where he thinks he comes off better. So that's kind of what
well,
bragging is.
yep. Yeah. So if I mentioned it, I probably would have put it in the next section, like after. Just look at me, or David McDonough. Um, but I don't think I put it down there either.
Yeah, he's definitely arguing the wrong thing. Um, yeah, introverts can do politics, for example. But
Arguably, like they're more dangerous doing it because they're less visible.
maybe. I don't know about that.
Fair enough.
But okay, false concession because it's not particularly relevant. I don't think that's why it's a false concession. Like, even if this was relevant, he's like, I grant this, except also there are a lot the other way. So it's not really a concession at all. He's
Yeah, like
he's sort of like conceding that half of them are that way when Berner's argument requires it to be 90%.
it's sort of like it's like the comparison. I don't know. What would you? How would So like the way that he uses a comparison indicates that it's a false concession because he's not really conceding anything to Berner. Um, he's saying
Yeah,
sure some are, but and it makes more sense to be more casual with something like that. Like, yeah, sure, some are, thing, but this isn't actually relevant in this case. Um, uh, which is not a great way to put it, but at least is better. But you could, yeah, more explicitly, like Berner seems to indicate that like this is a systemic problem with critical rationalists, and it's not, is an easier way to put that, or a better way to put that.
yeah. The purpose of RSP's sentence is to disagree with Berner. He says, but. He's like, you noticed a thing in reality, but it's not that notable or important or anywhere near adequate to make your case. Um, which is not a way of conceding to someone or granting something, that's a way of telling them they're wrong. So it's dishonest to phrase it as granting something. He's sort of saying, like, you noticed more than zero introverts. I grant that you didn't observe wrong. You didn't screw up that badly. However, if you look around more, you'll find that there are extroverts. So that's like really condescending. It's not a partial concession.
Berner, being someone who well, apparently is a critical rationalist, at least in part as well. Um, so it sort of, I mean, it matches up a little bit with like where he talks about what was it? Oh yeah, don't get out much being a bit pejorative or condescending. Um, sort of, yeah, which I suspect we'll see a little more of.
Yeah, so he's name dropping David McDonagh, who is a Libertarian Alliance guy from the UK, I believe. He's been on CR groups before. I think he was one of the people who tried to debate Godwin stuff with me.
Yeah, I couldn't find any reason that he would be particularly relevant. Um,
I'm guessing that RSP has had IRL contact with him and observed his disposition in person and found him
yep,
outgoing. And he's not really paying attention to the fact that, like, the vast majority of the audience hasn't met these people. Like, he doesn't really care about bridging the gap from him to the other people. He's acting all superior and expecting them to do all the work to figure out what he's talking about, or just
yep,
trust him. And it gets worse as he just starts like talking about his own stuff more later on.
yeah,
And it's arguing from a sample size of 2.
yeah. I mean, I say that it's anecdotal, but yeah, that's a
Yeah, anecdotal, same issue.
but a sample size of 2 makes it a
And
lot more
it's not
obvious.
even a sample, it's 2 cherry picked
Just
examples.
which and I don't think it wouldn't have actually made any difference to Berner's piece if 99.9% of critical rationalists were introverted and then there were 2 examples of people or 1.5 examples of people who are extroverted. That doesn't address Berner's thing at all. Um,
Yeah, and I do not believe that RSP or DMD are keeping CR alive in academia or the world. I don't think they're like, we're extroverted, but are they actually making the tradition stay alive? I don't think that so.
The fact
But
that
it's
I
not like
found
the extroversion led to the results that would contradict Werner.
that's true. With that second point there, the fact that I like searching for David McDonough, found a thing titled Ray Scott Percival's The Myth of the Closed Mind. And then in Google, it was actually like the reviewed by David McDonough was actually like dot dot dot. I think it was reviewed by dot dot dot. So that was like the second title or the second result.
Yeah, I have a review of that book on my blog as well. But yeah, despite RSP's book theme being how people aren't closed-minded, he was actually closed-minded about discussing my review. He was not able to take the discussion forward like he says is always possible.
Yeah.
And yet he didn't want to talk to me much, which seems to have some relevance to his extroversion claim.
Well, if you weren't going to give him favorable feedback, then what would be the point?
Well, what Berner wanted was people who could engage with other traditions, so it doesn't sound like he has the personality type for it.
Hmm. He's sort of, I mean, not proving Berner's point, but his he's not really. There's more of that, of course. But he's not really, serving as a good example.
Isn't arguing the point well at all. Yeah. Anecdote, no real explanation. Could
Well, I
have
thought
pointed out
like,
Berner.
oh yeah, sorry, this part.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say like this part, like pointed out that Berner didn't state or he could have pointed out that Berner didn't state Berner didn't link the stated traits of CR attracted people to the idea that it makes CR work harder. Like that would be like a reasonable thing to point out there. And then he could bring up, other stuff like this as, actually expanding upon that point. In that there's a huge diversity, here, like that would be a way to sort of make that point in a more legitimate sense. Or to say those things such that it like was actually legitimately supporting, or like expanding on a criticism of Berner's thing.
Okay, so yeah, not much argument. All aside, Berner doesn't take into account what the goals of someone in CR are/should be. Simpliciter?
It's a
Fancy
fancy word I
word.
picked up from philosophy, the one course of philosophy I did at uni. But it just means like without any other constraints. So
Yeah.
like this and nothing more. So it's useful in that sense. But it's totally uncommon.
That's not what the diction. Oh wait, it
Um,
didn't even show up.
yeah.
In
When
or
I
by itself. Yeah, see, this is.
I'm just gonna grab a jumper, by the way. I'm surprised that simply comes up or simplicity.
Okay, here are some that actually have the right word. Simply, absolutely, unconditionally, without any condition or consideration. Yeah, I would recommend not using the word.
Um, do you have a good substitute, or like is there a better word to sort of like mean without additional constraints?
Unconditionally?
That would make sense. Yep.
I'm not quite sure what you mean in the sentence, though.
Oh, because like is if your purpose or your goal is to just be doing philosophical work and nothing more, then
Oh,
why does being an academic
conditions
matter?
like having peers who talk with you? You mean like not worrying about those?
Um, well, if that's like that would be an additional sort of thing, but particularly like why do you need an office? Why does it need to be associated with a university? Why do you need to seek funding in an academic sense? Why do you need, like all of those sort of things that come with being an academic? Um, like academia is one path maybe to doing that sort of work, but it's not the only path. This was just something I noticed while I was writing this, though, like an additional criticism of Berner's piece. Well, maybe no, we did point this out because it's been stuff like that. He's presuming that academia is the only way to do this sort of stuff.
Okay, so this next part, it starts getting even worse.
Oh yeah,
Completely happy being surrounded by justificationists, just so you can have a go at them all at once. Smiley face.
yeah. So there's a bunch of points here that, and there's even like what do you call it? So yeah, I didn't quote particular like completely happy, um, particularly, but that's the sort of additional points there.
Yeah, I fear that it's not a lie. I fear that he likes fighting with people, and he likes feeling superior to people, and he doesn't care about having high quality peers to have discussions with. And he doesn't really know how to have good discussions anyways. Like, if you don't know how to have productive discussions, what do you need high quality peers for?
Mm.
Like, I presume he'd prefer to have peers where he can write paragraphs like this one and sort of get away with it without being called out for how awful it is.
Yeah. Well, the only other reason here I can like, from a uncharitable sort of judgment of him would be the only other reason he'd want high quality peers is because who else gives you like social feedback if you're not there to give it to yourself, sort of thing. Um, it's isn't it always comes. It's always more weighty if it comes from uh like someone else of high status.
Well, justificationists can have high status.
Mm.
In fact, they tend to have higher status than CR people. So that might be part of why he's happy with this, is he likes to be surrounded with high status people regardless of what their ideas actually are.
Yep.
I think he
Yep.
might also like being an outlier, a rebel, an iconoclast.
A contrarian,
Yeah.
a nonconformist. Yeah. Um, no, I agree. There's a lot of yep. I realize I touch on some of this stuff, but there's yeah, I reckon there's another 2 paragraphs that I could add here.
So yeah, there are definitely signs of lying, but I fear that he's not lying, which is
Yeah.
worse. Pro metaphorical violence. Yeah, have a go at them is pretty ambiguous.
Well, even if it was like, particularly arguing points, because he sort of points up later like, a more intellectual way as opposed to just insulting them or something. Um, but the like, although that's ambiguous, like you could definitely be pro metaphorical violence in like with better phrasing. Like if you put like publicly humiliate them by proving their ideas wrong or something like that, that would be sort of quite similar. Why would you say have a
Aggrandize.
go at them instead of refute, like so I can refute them all at once? Um, that's sort of an interesting, like only because of the comparison, it seems like a really interesting choice of words.
Yeah, he's definitely looking to bicker with them and at least compete with them
Hmm.
in some manner. Yeah, aggrandizing winning I agree with. He wants to beat them in some way. And he's I think he's quite capable of having discussions where both sides think they won and he just goes home happy. Because he thinks he won and that satisfies him. I don't think there's a lot of objectivity to it, which makes uh it makes enemies less threatening when your judgment of the results of battles is not objective.
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of counterpoint to real violence is typically with real violence, it's pretty obvious who the winner is, or it's obvious that both people lost, or that they withdrew and didn't really have a fight. Um, it's only with
Yeah.
ideas where it's easy to think that, like, for both teams to think that they won.
Yeah, even sports does a good job of having a score and a clear winner. The
Yep.
debate hasn't figured that out very well yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like, the way that we do debates would get much better with more numbers, though. Like, because like number of points you make about the other team isn't, crucial to winning a debate, even bad ones.
Yeah, I think it's more about crucial, decisive arguments that don't get addressed or impasse chains.
Yep.
Right, yeah. They're probably not convinced, but he feels like he won.
Well, he doesn't give any indication of like, I'm happy to being surrounded by justificationists. It means that we get more CR converts, for example, would be like a way
Yeah,
of sort of saying the same thing, but would actually have some sort of outcome attached to it, as opposed to this, which the outcome is just that he has a go at them.
yeah, he doesn't
But
give the impression of winning over a lot of converts.
having a go at someone as well is not a like. There's no way to fail at that goal, as opposed to like convincing them. You've got actually
Yeah,
two outcomes. This has nothing about the purpose of having a go besides having a go. Um, yeah.
and you'll note he doesn't say, like, learn from them either. He's not looking to maybe change his mind. Contrary to his
No.
book title about the myth of the closed mind, he seems to have a closed mind. Like, having a go
Well,
at
even
people is just what closed-minded people do.
even like not even like changing strategies of like, okay, that didn't convince them, so what are they thinking and how can I address it better? Like not even learning, not even doing basic problem solving around it. Which I guess reflects the fact that that's not the point.
Right, he's trying to fight with the people, not with their ideas, in the way he phrases it.
So that's more explicitly like each member or each person who's a justificationist has been, are, and always will be a justificationist, or is and always will be a justificationist. Um,
Yeah, I don't think it says this very clearly, but it doesn't contradict it either. And he doesn't present a world of flux where people keep changing who they are.
hmm.
I don't think it's this. I think he's like in a particular
Oh,
niche
yeah, no,
and has
I
spent a lot of time.
the but there,
Oh,
like I think that
contradicted
point is,
anyways.
yeah. So it's, like I can see why people would interpret it like that, but I think it's wrong too. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is bad. Pleased with himself. Yeah, he's sort of saying like I'm an extrovert who enjoys yelling at people and having clashes and being yelled at. Smiley face.
Feelings of self-superiority or whatever else, regardless of what ended up happening in the world. It's it's a big smiley face as well. Like,
Um, so in what way do you think he's socially pressuring others here?
so because of the way that he puts himself and the way that Lulu refers to him in the thing, it's sort of implying that as like an authority figure or an expert, that if you don't feel happy about this like he does, then you're wrong for some reason. So, uh, you should like agree with him because obviously he's an expert, and if he thinks it's good, then it must be good. That sort of logic. That's how I think that it socially pressures people.
So basically because he's a role model?
Yeah, or projected as such. Yeah.
Okay. He loved finding Marxist-Leninists and arguing with them about econ calc.
Yeah, I don't know how common like the economic calculation problem is as a term, um, but I'd never heard of it before.
It's fairly common in Austrian economics circles. I don't know about outside that. I think some Marxists are familiar with it, but only the ones who actually read books, not most of them.
Yeah, okay. Most of
Like
the econ
most,
stuff I've read is of an Austrian bent. But maybe that's like it's easy. Like there's not many more words added to actually explain what it is. So that might be why it doesn't appear much in the stuff I've read.
I've seen it lots of times.
Fair enough.
Um, the impossibility of justifying one's position thing. It makes me sound like he's throwing skeptical arguments at people. It doesn't sound like he's using CR properly to me. It sounds like he's sort of saying, we can't know anything, how do you know that? At people like he's a skeptic, which is the, that's what objectivists attack CR for allegedly being.
Yeah. So I didn't actually read that uh at all. Like that meaning. Um, I thought it was like more related to the stuff you said previously. I mean, the second paragraph there, I say the impossibility of justifying one's position is ambiguous. Um, so I think regardless, it's definitely like an ambiguous phrasing there.
Okay, so concept drops. Yeah, this one doesn't stand out to me. Like, I might refer to it.
I think the way that he's referring to it as well is part of the problem. Like he's not talking about like Marxism being unable to deal with the economic calculation problem, for example. Um, like this is, I found some people and I threw something at them. And so I think it's worse to use here. This is like a
Yeah.
bad use, whereas alternate uses can be good.
It's also notable that he doesn't throw his own ideas at people. He apparently just finds ideas to throw at people. So he's maybe looking for contrarian ideas so he can throw them at people, and that's why he likes them.
It's also like, oh, I'm not sure how much it is outside of his like purview. Like his sort of putting himself forward as an expert on CR stuff here, but not on economic stuff necessarily. So there's like, obviously decent overlap and compatibility, but yeah, it seems like a bit of a non sequitur.
So you're missing a lot of context here. The economic calculation problem was in a paper from Mises in approximately 1920, and it was highly influential and sparked a large debate. And a lot of Marxists said, wow, we didn't realize that problem. Thank you for helping make Marxism better by revealing our flaws. We'll fix that now. So it was a major point that like everyone had been missing, even if it
Yeah.
sounds simple when Wikipedia tries to phrase it.
Or it's just like for me, it's sort of just background stuff now. Like this was never a significant problem for me to get over type thing. Learning econ
Yeah,
stuff.
but
So
I think if you read the paper, you'd find it
yeah.
had like some good points in it that aren't
Oh,
simple or obvious.
I presume this paper predates when RSP was going around throwing stuff at Marxist-Leninists, right?
Yeah, it's from around 1920. Yeah, 1920. I'll put this in Discord. I wouldn't trust Wikipedia for this kind of thing, by the way.
No, normally I wouldn't. I Googled it and it was the first result, and the first sentence seemed to line up with stuff I already understood. So that's the main reason I mentioned it there.
So this I think is a modern perspective. I think that they changed their focus because of criticism and problems that came up. I think they used to take more of a serious economic stance and try to argue economics more, and then they
Yeah.
lost, so then they focused on other things. So that's compatible with the paper being a big deal, and it's compatible with it being more of an open issue at the time that RSP was debating with people.
Yeah, though I wonder how old he is and when he went to uni, or I wonder when he went to uni is really the point of that question. Yeah. I don't know how much really would have changed in like the last 30 years, for example. If there's 60 years before that, 70 years before that, since the paper came out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was definitely a bit of a slow process for things to get sorted out,
Yeah.
and still not totally.
It's sort of funny though, in that if things were mostly sorted out by like today comparing to RSP's University of Warwick days, if things were mostly sorted out when he was at uni, it's like the Marxists who were like, oh, this is a major problem, we're going to go try and fix it. Like that's actually a decent response to criticism. Now, if they just ignored it after that, that's bad. But like if someone points out a problem, then saying, "Oh, thanks, I'm going to try and fix it," is a much better response than like throwing things at people, especially if they like continue to not believe it or whatever else. Yeah, there's sort of an interesting comparison there, or like juxtaposition of RSP versus the Marxists.
Yeah, what basically happened is Mises pointed out why their fixes to socialism were still wrong and also didn't work, and then they stopped talking to him.
Yeah.
And Hayek undermined Mises's position, and so they started responding to Hayek more because he was easier to debate with.
Yeah.
Concept dropping here is not making a point relative to LT's post. Yeah, he's quite off topic here. He's just talking about his own personal history and how much fun he had arguing economics. Apparently, he doesn't have enough good CR argument examples, so he had to switch fields to brag.
So, well, he was talking about justificationist or justificationism, and then immediately swapped to economics, which is an odd choice.
Right, like why wasn't he throwing like some Popperian argument at inductivists?
Um, or like a new take that he had on an argument or whatever else, as opposed to like, here's something from 60, 70 years ago, um, throwing it at easy targets relatively.
Yeah, so he's just off on this tangent claiming that he's extroverted. More anecdotes and excuse to drop social status signals.
Yep.
Yeah, he's trying to demonstrate higher value by storytelling, and it's pretty transparent.
There's not even like a point or a conclusion to these anecdotes that he's dropping. Like, there's lots of like thinking about like I've heard anecdotes from Feynman or whatever, and they have like often like
Yeah,
a point to why he's telling them. Um, or like John Conway, there's some lectures of his that are like he goes way off topic telling these stories, but they're like really interesting stories about that are relevant to what he's talking about, as opposed to just oh, I enjoy throwing stuff at people, so I'm extroverted.
I think he was throwing both at once to overwhelm people and come at them from two quite different angles, which, if you sort of swap back between those in a debate, you can be really hard to deal with in real time and when it's chaotic. Because
Yeah.
whenever they start beating you on one point, you just switch to the other one for a while, and like move the goalposts
So
around all the time. And
if he was talking about like you can't justify your position as sort of like a solipsism type thing, I feel like that would be a really poor argument to make and is like not compatible with CR. Um, unless he's taking an overly literal meaning of justify here. I mean, he did just talk about justificationists, so maybe, but like
CR
Marxists and
people in
Leninists.
general
Um,
don't understand justificationism, so that's part of why I'm suspicious.
yeah, okay.
I I suspect what he does here though is use double standards. So he'll apply skeptical standards to his opponents, and then but he won't apply the same sort of aggressiveness of this to his own arguments,
Hmm.
which he thinks are somehow different. It's enough to win an economics debate, but like they weren't having an organized discussion where they were carefully resolving the issues. They were like in a pub throwing arguments at each other or something.
The other thing there is like in terms of changing the goalposts. So he goes and engages people on something that they know and care about and say that they know and care about. And then what, like, once they give a response, he switches to like a philosophical argument, like changes the goalposts on them to demand that they be philosophers now instead of whatever they were before. Um,
Yeah, that's pretty unfair. I don't think I understand this sentence. Um, where do don't have contradictions in our ideas? How does that relate to the other stuff?
that would be why, like the impossible to justify part. So it's impossible because there's a contradiction. Um, like that was the only other way that I figured to read it.
Oh, see,
Um,
I read this as the possibility of justifying one's position, meaning any position. So I don't think it's
yeah,
related specifically to there being a problem with their position.
yeah. Um, I presumed that the use of the word one was just lazy, um, like swapping subjects or things like that.
I do not read it that way. I think that this is a type of thing that you see from CR people, is that they say you can't justify any position.
Which yeah, I think that's a disingenuous way to take justify. Like in the particular context of discussing justificationism, it's like useful to distinguish between like the word justify and like a concept like explain. But like in general, like the explanation is the justification sort of thing. Like if you take a looser, more like an actual term that the way that people use it, it's sort of just pedantic if nothing else. Like, yeah,
I don't think he was being pedantic about their language. Like, I don't think they used the word justify. I think what happened is they would start arguing their case. Then he would say, you could be wrong about that. And then start going at them that way. You can't prove that you're right. No matter what you say, there's ways to doubt it.
yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a bit of a pointless thing because wouldn't they just say, well, that it, like applies to you as well? Which, yeah, you can go and talk about fallibilism after that, but the economic calculation problem is off the table now as like a thing. Like at least
Right.
as far as it sounds like, yeah.
So
RSP,
it's
was you saying?
bad and distracting, but that's what it sounds to me like he was doing. It's a fairly typical sort of thing for this type of person to do.
Yeah.
Um, this might be partly because Popper was anti-Marx as well.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Popper attacks Marx in Open Society. So he thinks he's talking to an anti-Marxist crowd, and then he had gotten a non-Popperian argument to help attack Marx even better. So he's like ahead of the game.
Yep. So in my parenthetical that I followed up with, I say like other active pro-communist groups, but that sort of is a bit overly thing. Just there's not many active social groups in general that, or like things at uni
Oh,
that
so you mean
would discuss this sort of
Marxist-Leninists
stuff.
in particular as opposed to other communists? I
Um,
think when he says this, he
mm,
might mean Marxist or Leninist and sort of just mean the whole broad category rather than trying to be restrictive.
yeah, no, that's how I took it. I mean that it was an error for me to put other active pro-communist groups in the parenthetical. That I shouldn't have done that. I meant something more broad that I didn't put down properly. Just active groups that would engage with him on, something like this.
Oh,
Like
okay, yeah. So he may not have had a lot of choices for who to
um,
debate.
at least on like economic stuff. In that you're not gonna, go up to some neoliberals and throw that argument at them. They'll be like, sure. Um, so if he's using other people's ideas, and particularly if he doesn't have a great understanding of all those ideas, then he has to pick extreme groups like this, um, because he can't compare. He can't, have a meaningful debate with someone who's like studied neoliberal economics or something like that, because
There's
they just know
there,
so much more than him.
there's plenty of anti-Keynesian stuff he could have found and used if he wanted to.
Yeah, I get the feeling that this is a lot easier though.
I don't know about that.
Um,
I think in some ways Keynes is more ridiculous than Marx and easier to attack.
for RSP at university, like, and particularly if he wanted to feel like he won regardless, that would be like my, um, yeah, I guess caveats on it, sort of thing. But I also don't know enough about the other arguments.
I know you can get anti-Keynes arguments from Hazlitt or Riesman that would work well. This is funny. He's sort of bragging about how he went out and fought people from other intellectual traditions, in that to say how he's extroverted, so Berner's wrong. But what Berner actually said was, you need people who can go like make friends with other intellectual traditions.
So yeah, I mean, um, I feel like Berner's argument is a lot more convincing in the light of RSP's response to it.
I would not figure he means he doesn't love it anymore. I'd figure he doesn't do it anymore. But it's hard to tell, and I just wouldn't expect his wording to be precise enough to know.
Yeah, I didn't think it was worth focusing too much on in terms of there's a typo with
Typo.
it, but yeah.
Yeah. Right, so the at them should sort of be at the end. It should be throwing x and y, or x plus y at them. Not throwing x at them plus y.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It could have been like
good.
comma plus P2, like he could have done other things there, but yeah, but it's just like sloppy grammar.
Yeah, okay, you got it. Yeah, that's a good catch. Devil punch to the jaw, glass jaws, oh god.
This was, yeah, like,
And he's like dying of laughter to the point that he's crying about people getting punched. Like, wow.
yeah,
Okay, what do you say? More self-aggrandizing. Yeah, see, he liked throwing two things at once to like overwhelm people, get them on the defensive and stuff. Alright. Look how good I am, especially compared to other people who tried the same thing. Yeah, by saying how much he liked it, he's sort of implying he won a lot and like had a good time with it. Whereas like if he was losing all the time, he would have had a bad time. Metaphorical violence. Yeah, like very clearly now. We're talking
yeah,
about
there's no
punches.
transparency. Like that, and then using a boxing term, which I
Yeah.
didn't read into much, but it means like particularly that someone has a weakness to knockout punches. And so that's actually like, extra stuff on top there in terms of the knockout. They're saying that this was enough, and then what, they were knocked out. They didn't concede. They didn't change their mind. You just overwhelm them such that they were unable to participate anymore. Like, what's the what's the conclusion from that?
Yeah, okay, so nasty stuff. Um, as for critical rationalism getting entrenched, it's needed to get there, out there and apply it to various problems in different domains. So, like punching Marxists? Is that how we
Like,
avoid
that's good.
entrenchment of CR?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I mean. I point out, I think that he doesn't give any. Uh, yeah, the last thing, he doesn't give examples or explanation and moves on. Um,
I think it refers to CR.
yes. Yeah, I say that in the first paragraph.
I didn't think that was because it's posted in CR form. I just saw as for critical rationalism getting.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Just that.
so it's just a
Just that it's easy
keyword right
enough
here.
in any context. It's easy enough. I
It's
mean, the
like the
CR
thing
forum
he's
obviously makes
talking
it
about.
more easy. But yeah, yeah. No, I think that's reasonable in any situation. Um, though some formulations could talk about the whole idea. I feel like.
Projecting expertise. No qualifiers like I think. Or the best way. Right, he just straight says what's needed. Doesn't give explanations, moves on. Yeah, there's not much in the way of content. They start talking about knights right after punching, which is and fighting
Yeah.
people.
This was like, yeah, this is a bad sentence. This is approximately where I like the end of the sentence is roughly where I get up to. I'm just going to go to the bathroom while you're reading that. Okay.
Okay, a couple of things. For the concession thing, he's not just using yes, he's using yes, but, which is even more of a here's a minor concession, but here's why you're wrong anyways kind of formulation.
Yeah.
As to the knights, they are both literally knights. Metawar is a sir.
Why did he not put that in there then?
Like sloppy writing, I think because he had the word knights right here, probably.
Yeah. I mean that I think makes it sort of even like worse that his like it makes it worse and more ambiguous. Um, I mean, if he didn't want Paparian to modify knights, he would say Paparians and knights, blah, and that would at least be not ambiguous. But there would be a question of why are you bringing up their titles? Also, if he was just talking about regular knighthoods, I'm not sure you would capitalize it like that.
Yeah, I don't know if the word knight is supposed to be capitalized.
I don't think so. Sir is, but that's the title. Maybe it is, but yeah.
He's sort of trying to suggest that they were these great fighters for Papyrian ideas. When he says we lost them, he's like speaking for the community.
Yeah.
And he's making it sound like they had something to do with him, like they were on his team.
Whereas I don't know when Eccles died, but like 1987, I imagine was pretty early in RSP's career, if it was in his career at all.
You keep using should have known better. I don't know exactly what standard by which they should have known better. Or like how do you judge that?
So yeah, okay. I mean, in each case, like I'm referring to the like in the first case that you've underlined there, like we shouldn't need violence to defend good ideas. Which is what RSP should have known, and he should have known better than to say something like that. I guess is and then in the second example, like defending Popper as virtuous, not having good ideas, rather than having good ideas. And likewise, he should know that having good ideas is more important than defending Popper, and should have known better than to say that. I guess the standard I'm using in some ways is whether I can tell whether it's compatible with CR or not, because if I can do it, then surely he should be able to. Should be able to. So I think in part this is an issue because I've like used it frequently as a sort of way to try and abstract things or like think about it from my own sort of broader point of view or purpose.
Yeah, so I guess you could say he should have known better if he's the person that he presents himself as. On the other hand, if he's not, then it fits with his writing and everything makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about this. He's attacking other people who have different opinions.
And because it's like respect philosophy and not something like are Poperians or something like that, it's particularly in terms of like his judgment of whether they respect it enough or things. It also, because it's respecting philosophy and not like um like, or respecting has two sort of meanings. One of them is to like respect the importance of philosophy, and the other is like respecting either ideas or philosophers or something like that. I get the feeling it's sort of the second, as in like major living scientists shouldn't think about this, but they should like respect that we know more about it than them, something like that, or at least there's an element of that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's overly into small sample sizes again. He names like 3 individuals, which is a poor way to talk about trends.
Yeah. The one of the things that gets me as well is, so he goes out of his way to point out that Tipler's an astrophysicist. Um, that's not in the parenthetical, but the point that's actually important to what he's saying is like Tipler's work on something to do with philosophy or philosophy of science is then in a parenthetical, but it doesn't have to do with the astrophysics work. Like the only reason to mention he's an astrophysicist is the connection to scientists. Um, this is, I mean, in terms of, and RSP said who do respect philosophy and often refer to Popper's work. Um, so often is an odd thing to say, but who do like, credit Popper's work, maybe is more general. Um, and then he goes on to cite a work from an astrophysicist that's presumably like particularly on philosophy. Um, oh, it's not actually a work. It's just that he's got too many. He's got a lot of capitals. It's just a reference to a quote, maybe, like as in maybe there's a quote that goes with that.
Yeah, he's mentioning Popper's book and saying that Tipler praised Popper's book. He doesn't say where or when Tipler did this.
Or
And
how
he says,
often.
yeah, he says often refer, but then he gives one example with no citation.
Yeah.
And the thing he
Oh no
seems to
no
have chosen,
don't worry. There are many other examples too. That's the last 3 words of that sentence. It's like
yeah, and the thing he seems to have chosen his example for is that the praise was strong. So his selection criteria was not, is this representative or does this show it happens a lot? It's, let me find the strongest praise I can and use that.
yeah. Um, it's not a contribution to philosophy. It's not like, I mean, and described. It makes it sound like Tipler gave a presentation at a conference somewhere, and someone asked a question, "What do you think of Popper?" And he said, "It's one of the most important books of the," or his book, Logic of Scientific Discovery, is blah. Like that could have literally been it. Um, to fit that how RSP is
Yeah,
describing it, which yeah is not particularly a good case to make here. Also, he's saying we lost 2 Popperians, but there are other major living scientists. Are those 2 guys? Were they? Okay, no. So Medawar was a biologist and writer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but um,
but yeah, they're both scientists, I believe.
Eccles was an Australian neurophysiologist, which I mention only because I'm Australian. Um, yeah, okay.
But they get mentioned a lot when Hyperions want to say stuff about like having social status, basically. Which they don't actually know the best social status examples to use. I think there's something interesting about that. I think they're always like Metawar, Eccles, but I never ever hear them say Feynman. Because I think they have not noticed that Feynman was Popperian.
Yeah, no. Whereas Feynman is a much better, like, particularly because Feynman's known for like education and engagement and stuff like that. Like Feynman did a lot of that sort of stuff, far more than I gather most academics ever do. So the Wikipedia page for John Eccles has a section called philosophy, where it starts with in blah, Eccles summarizes his philosophy. The next like 8 paragraphs are like all of this is one quote. And this section has like 8 words on 10 words and then another 20 words down here. I'm just like, that seems a bit ridiculous.
Oh, right. It's overly long for a summary.
Well, it's not even a summary, I guess. It might be a good extract to explain it, but then anyway, then someone at Wikipedia, someone has then written despite these words in blah, and there's no citation. Anyway, yeah. That's just an aside. So the other thing that I did notice, which I'm not sure about because it's a bit of a stretch, like the last thing there, if one imprudently allows, oh, what was it? Oh yeah, sorry. I forgot that I did a little bit on the next sentence as well. But yeah, if one imprudently allows sound card arrogance into safe space, corruption, blah, may fallen with it like trees from a cold autumn wind. So because this, like, it's not like he's poetic throughout the rest of the thing. But cold and autumn, for whatever reason, remind me of the first sentence of 1984 particularly. I'm not sure if and maybe that's just August. Oh, and August is spring in Australia, but autumn or fall in the northern hemisphere. But I was wondering whether there's actually like
It's
a slight
kind
reference
of
there.
late summer, at
Oh,
least
bright
where
cold day
I've
in April.
lived.
April is autumn here. But it's a bright cold day in April, not bright cold day in August. But yeah, no, I think I'm just reading into that.
Okay.
He would have, if he wanted to reference 1984, he would have, it's just cold is really the only thing that's a link there.
Rational argument has a force of its own, as I argue in depth in my book. Ah, now I get a hint at why he wrote the comment.
Yeah. I realize my grammar here
Oh, I should have
is
done. You
not
mean
great.
she should have mentioned the book because she was the one trying to bring up an idea from the book?
Yeah, it would have been like, it's not just like more appropriate and more acceptable for her to mention the book to bring up an idea from the book. But she doesn't. She mentions the author, which we don't even find out that he's written a book on it until this point. Like LT doesn't mention the book at all, I think.
Right. They're always assuming the audiences know a bunch of stuff. They're just sort of acting like you should know.
So the reason that I say it's contradictory that I didn't really point out was I think that he's saying like rational argument has reach, but he's just spent the past however many sentences talking about other things, as opposed to like rational argument has reach is potentially like a response to a whole bunch of points that have come up previously.
Hold on. So by reach, do you mean what David means in BOI?
Sort of. I'm using it as a way to not say power. But I think I do. I don't know another meaning of it, like
Okay,
of
so
reach that's compatible with this.
David's meaning of reach is that an idea has widespread applicability. So it solves many problems instead of just a couple. Ideas can be like general, generic principles, that kind of thing. I don't think that's what RSP is talking about. I think he's saying that rational arguments are forceful in a way that like makes people listen to them and change and be open-minded or something.
I've just realized that in all of this use about force and power, so reach is maybe a synonym for power of rational argument, but like reach a rational argument is meaning a similar thing to that, but it doesn't mean like the force of rational argument. Like that's different, even though power and force are somewhat synonymous. So I think I might have skipped over that in my head because I've sort of lumped the force and the power concepts together.
I think
Do you
power
think?
is a synonym for force, not reach. Um,
Um,
but maybe a better word for thinking about this is irresistibleness. I think he might be saying like there's something about it that makes it hard to resist it.
yeah, and that's more obvious that it's not like I don't mean the same thing when I say reach as irresistible. I think the reason that I mentioned that about power is just that I think it has more definitions. Like the power of knowledge would be, I'd say, like the easiest example.
Okay, so how helpful are you finding the stuff we've been doing this week?
Yeah, fairly helpful, I think. I sort of feel like it's been reasonably straightforward. In that when I'm like sitting down to try and analyze stuff, it's I don't feel like I'm more worried about stuff that I've got wrong, or like where I'm like missing big things. But from what I can tell, I don't think I've missed much that's like particularly big. And there's some like context issues and things like that. Um, but uh, yeah, I feel like going through the analyzing lie stuff again has been pretty helpful. I was thinking about whether I should do the puppet strings thing again, like with How to Train Your Dragon 2. Um, but that was more recent. I didn't ever finish up that though. I think I made one long reply, and then didn't take it further. So maybe just continuing that is a thing. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
I was thinking about this in general, as in like dishonesty, and particularly the relationship between like dishonesty and social stuff, and why it's important for analysis. Um, like why it's important for like being able to express ideas clearly or stuff. And I think I like have a decent sort of answer to that. So I feel like it's been pretty valuable.
okay. I do think that if you look through all the material, you'll find a bunch of things that you didn't cover. There's quite a lot of things
Yeah.
throughout the email threads. The best place to look is my summary emails, which are not totally complete. Like I didn't repeat everything I already said, but um, yeah, at some point after people stopped posting, I posted my own versions for both passages. So that's the best single place to compare what you found to.
Yep. I think this might be. Oh, this might be LTs or analysis of LT stuff as opposed to. Because I think you mentioned that you posted uh, RSP stuff first.
Oh yeah, if I'm doing 3 passes, that looks like the right one. That should be like
Um,
my main post.
so just before that, there was a different thing with the subject, Elliot's RSP analysis. So yeah, so it's a different thread under a different title. Yep, there it is. So I'll minimize it so I don't see anything before we finish the RSP stuff. Um, but yeah, no, I think like stuff like this, I get the impression that in most analysis, like or I don't know, I want to say like classroom lessons about analysis or textual analysis, this sort of stuff is not included at all. And there's some somewhat obvious reasons for that. But it's really important for particularly for anything that's less than like written in an academic paper or something like that, where there's a lot less of this sort of stuff there, though there's still a bit. But no, it's been sort of quite enlightening.
Okay, so we should think about where to focus next, maybe, and also, do you have any idea how much time we have left before you become busy or?
I was thinking about that. So uh, we might be close to a 3-4 week counter. At least 3 weeks would be like I
Oh,
don't have a
okay.
problem committing to that. So yeah, so we're not like super close. I'll give you as much notice as I can.
Okay. We're around 2 months in, I think.
Approximately. I think it
Yeah.
was it was the 23rd or 24th of June that we started. So yeah, so about that. One thing I did notice in terms of where to go next and things. So I found the writing exercises uh like quite helpful in terms of like practice, but also in the sense that like being able to write a decent 600 words in 10 minutes type thing. Um, uh, Sort of loosely, I'll say, gave me a lot of confidence. Like it made me sort of real. Like they were things that I definitely didn't think I could have done particularly well. Like 2 months ago. Um, so gave me a lot of confidence is not exactly the right way to put it, but it's sort of shown. It's like evidence of a change in my abilities, I guess. Um, uh, what I noticed after that though was that after when was it? Like a week and a half ago or something. Like I've been meaning to do some stuff like that in my own time and I just haven't. Um, yeah, so a week ago thereabouts maybe. I think it was last Friday. Oh, I can't. That's why.
Yeah, I think one of the more important things when we stop will be trying to maintain some kind of schedule management so you can keep working on some of these things.
Yes. Yeah. Um, that's one thing that I was sort of like thinking about and worried was yeah that like regular things or regular like devoting time regularly to this sort of stuff is going to be important. Um, on that note of like schedule management and things, another sort of problem that I've been thinking about recently is what to do with like people ask one generally to do stuff over time. At sometimes it like if you just say yes to everything, your backlog gets way too big. Um, so I guess the problem of managing uh, people asking or expecting things of you, particularly when there's like a connection to responsibility somewhere, um, and when you don't want to do it or you don't think it's worthwhile, both like the response to that, but then particularly like the management of those sort of things. And there are some stuff that you do need to do, or that one does need to do at various points. Yeah, because in isolation, none of these individual things are particularly bad. It's just when it's all there at once, I end up backpedaling a lot to try and keep up with the volume. I've got a lot
Yeah,
of post-it notes on the bottom of
do
this
you
notebook.
estimate how much resources like time stuff will take and then how much you have available and then compare them?
Not particularly. There's like a little bit of that in the back of my mind, but I don't really, um, I don't estimate them at the time. Or if I do, I'm often like bad at estimating. Um, like it'll be a factor of 2 or 3 out sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, having large buffers helps with that.
Arguably, the worst one is at estimating the more buffer one needs. Yeah. I guess part of my other concern is that I don't want to like just like outright say like no or shut someone down type thing, or because a lot of the stuff that's like asked of me is stuff that needs to be done. Um, and it's stuff that I still care about, at least in some sense. But yeah.
Yeah, you have to prioritize resources at some point, though. You only get so much time, etc. And
Yeah.
if that seems really hard, then there's often some way to look at the bigger picture to see why something matters more than something else. Or, if you do X, it's so important it'll like override other things or like have a bigger effect or something. That can like help you not mind neglecting other things. Or
One thing that oh yeah.
you can also find ways to do things faster and more efficiently, like, or delegate them or whatever.
Yeah, I've been getting a bit better at delegation stuff. The faster and more efficient is sort of interesting in that, like a lot of stuff like that, the first payoff is usually less in magnitude than the amount of time you spend sort of developing the skill, or getting, making things faster.
Yeah,
One thing
but
it
if
does,
the skills are reusable for many different things rather than specific to a single activity, then you can get a lot of payoff out of them.
yes, oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm not saying um, that they're bad to do. I think they are actually like, in many ways more important, unless the sky's falling type thing. But it's hard to convince people that they should wait longer or that their thing is less important or something like that. When you're doing this, like other people don't necessarily see it that way, so there's like maybe some issues there. One idea that did occur to me in terms of um, estimating size is that if you're quick with both estimating um, and then your schedule or like the amount of work that you've got to do, then you can say to someone like, okay, well, I think this will take, like 6 hours and I can slot it in 4 weeks from now. And then it's not just you saying, like, okay, I'll get to it, and then them getting sort of frustrated, but it sort of actually puts things more in perspective when people are asking stuff of you, which might be some of the problem. Like I've got like things in different directions essentially, or from different directions. That is part of
Yeah,
the issue here.
so another thing is you really don't want to be in firefighting mode where you're going around putting out different fires. You want to be like having an organized plan and pursuing like the main good things that create value. And if you show people that plan and where things fit into it, it can help them see your perspective or your priorities. Like
Yeah.
if you have like you can use gold rat techniques if you have a current reality tree and a future reality tree and negative branches and so on. And you show people that, then they can see what you're doing and um, if your plan is very powerful, then maybe it will solve their problem as a side effect, or you can point out why their thing is like um, not going to stop the plan from working, so not very relevant, or in some cases maybe it is relevant, like this will be a reason the plan would fail, so you better do it, and you can better figure out which are which.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm sort of trying to think of how to apply that. So, like one example is that someone will say, like, oh, there's like a fund that's, like a philanthropic fund that's like giving away money for electronic voting stuff, for example, to like solve this problem, quote unquote. Um, and then so they'll suggest, ask, or demand, depending on my relationship with them, to like for me to write stuff about, or like write a submission or something like that. Anyway, I don't think it's particularly worthwhile because I don't see any reason to think that we're more able to get money there than anywhere else. And when you spend a lot of time doing stuff to try and get money, especially when it's specialized, it doesn't like have much in the way of I guess repeatability or like use in a wide range of cases. Sometimes that's true, but even with like funding stuff, that can be really dependent on who the audience is and what sort of money it is, etc. So yeah, my priorities at the moment, like I'm more inclined to spend time doing like this, getting better at philosophy, and you know, uh, well, there's a lot of sort of reach with this stuff, but than to do something like this, even though like writing a thing to this Tusk Philanthropies thing might be like it feels like a lottery type thing, and the upside could be really, really big. I just don't think it's likely. And for some reason, other people do think it's likely because they're like specific, but they've only got $10 million, which is not very much. And there's a bunch of like other companies that are doing stuff along these lines, even if they're
Right.
like not good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, with something like this, could you delegate it? Because maybe there's not much downside to trying, so you could let someone else try, even if they would do a worse job.
So yeah, right now there's only delegation going on. Uh, this relates to like both like Flux and Secure Vote, so there's sort of two sides of that. The demand is on me because I'm like a keystone in both cases, in terms of technical stuff, which is sort of somewhat frustrating because I don't think that technical stuff is going to sell these guys. If they were like technically oriented, then I don't think they would have gone about it this way. They're going about it this way because they're like ideologically or politically motivated.
Right.
So there's multiple reasons for them not to pay attention to us. In that, like having a political party means that we're often seen as like partisan in some way or not politically neutral. And yeah, being opinionated about other stuff. Yeah. So I can't actually find like particular stuff on the Tusk thing, but
Okay, so another thing I wanted to bring up related to doing ongoing learning stuff is I
mhm.
think getting in a habit of reading books regularly is really valuable. What sort of history do you have with books? Like, have you read a lot in the past?
Not particularly. Most of the books I've bought remain unread. I so don't have habits around it, and even when I mean, I've been meaning to go back to the goal for like a month and a half or however long it's been, and I just haven't picked it up again. In fact, I don't even know where my Kindle is anymore. Looking around, which I bought particularly for this sort of stuff. So yeah, my habits around that have been pretty poor. I've done most reading recently via audiobooks, though there have been a few books that I've read. Otherwise, depending on how you count volumes and stuff, I've read like 5 fiction books since October 2018. So what's that? Last 2 years?
Okay, yeah, that's not
Um,
much.
no, that's particularly like fiction, like the Book of the New Sun series and Earth of the New Sun. Uh, but yeah, some of that was audio. Um, some of it was physical. Uh, Otherwise, can't think of any non-fiction books besides Critical Chain and The Goal. So I did read a Critical Chain just of my own accord. I might have read some of the other. Did I read any other Gold Rat stuff? No.
Did you read It's Not Luck?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's a good one. So with books, yeah, trying to get more used to it, and like you gotta build up some sort of skill. Like it's hard to say exactly what the skill is, but if you've read a lot more books, you get more used to it in a way, and it gets easier in a way, like more normalized in your life. And yeah, you have to find like ways of reading or what perspective on books or something that works for you and makes it enjoyable and uh, fits your schedule and so on. Part of that is don't always try to do high focus reading. Like, you can just read stuff quickly and become familiar with it, and that has value even if you miss some parts. And one of the things you can do is you can um, pick the best ones and then go back and reread them slowly, but don't do that with most of the books.
Well, even it occurs to me with a lot of the choice, like there are some parts that I'd want to like reread in more detail, but I think most of it is maybe not like a vast majority, but the majority of it is stuff that I could read low effort wise and not have too much of an issue because most of it's like not quite filler, but there's a lot of extra stuff or repetition in there. Um, yeah, maybe I'm overestimating that though. But it occurs to me that I've tried to only read the choice in high effort mode, and I probably could. Well, I could have easily finished the book if I read it in low effort mode as well. Since then, which at least then I'd know what the second half of the book is about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something I think is important to work on at some point. It doesn't have to
mm,
start with nonfiction. Like you can read anything, whatever's the easiest to get the habit going more. Whatever you enjoy, you know. Whatever's like
yeah,
the most accessible is probably the best place to start.
I tend to like. So one thing that I don't do a lot of is have um like a habit of reading, in that like there'll be times where I'll read a book, but usually I only finish the book if I stick with it and read it in a relatively short space of time, as opposed to um yeah.
Yeah, if you're not sure what to read, this is a good thing to try. These are pretty quick reads.
Cool.
These are Robert Heinlein.
I haven't read Starship Troopers, but I've got a friend who quite likes that, I guess the lore of that in general. I'm not sure if he's read it either, but that might be a good thing to do. Um, just because there's a bit of like, as if there's reasons to come back to it, like, discussing it with a friend, that helps.
Yeah, and if you've seen the movie, you can compare them.
Yep.
They're kind of
Actually, and
different.
and thinking about Book of the New Sun, one of the reasons that I read it was that I talked about it with my brother. Like, uh, yeah, it was sort of a thing that we used to talk about regularly. So yeah. Um,
Yeah, and every single one of the early ones is good.
okay. Yeah. Cool.
He gets a lot more hit or miss on the later ones.
They get longer and things like that, and
Yeah, some of them
more
are
hardcore.
weird. He has like some stuff about polygamy that isn't. It's not very similar to what he was writing before.
Yep. I get the impression that you don't think it was particularly good either.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by that. Um, Stranger in a Strange Land is one of his most famous ones. It's actually quite strange, and I wouldn't particularly recommend it. But yeah, you can't go wrong with the ones in the first section.
Yeah. Cool. Um,
Part of what I've heard is that when authors get famous enough, they don't have to listen to their editors anymore.
Yeah.
Someone said this about Heinlein specifically. And they that was part of their theory of what happened with his later books.
Well, if you've got if the supply side of editors gets vast enough, then anyone can look like they're a waste of your time, right? In terms of, screw you, I'll just get another editor, and you inevitably end up uh, finding one that's is a yes man if you keep doing that.
He has a lot of short stories as well. Like these are well under book length, and they're mostly good as well.
Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, just thinking about it, there's a lot of stuff that I've bought over the years that is, well, probably stuff that needs a bit higher focus. That might be needlessly stopping me. Actually, that's not necessarily true. Like I bought a whole bunch of Terry Pratchett a few years ago and like read a significant amount of that. There was a
Yeah,
really
well,
pretty,
so these are easier to read than that. Like,
yeah,
half of the new ones were in a juvenile series, like they were meant to be readable by middle school kids. So the writing
yeah,
style is easier to read. Similar to Harry Potter, has a particularly easy writing style. It's easy to read those books quickly
yeah.
compared to like a typical fantasy book for adults.
Um, it's probably good to use that sort of stuff as a way to help practice like the habit elements as well. In that when they're like if they're easy to read and entertaining, there's very little like to stop you reading them, and there's a
Yeah,
lot more um, leeway in terms of how what you're thinking or feeling about or otherwise outside that um, state of mind stuff. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
and these are generally short enough that you could read them in one day if you wanted to.
yep, that's good. Um,
Yeah, so another thing that I think would be good for us to do is to work on some debate trees where you take a debate people had and put it into a tree with the arguments back and forth. I don't know if you have material that would work well for that. If not, we could maybe just find one of my recent less wrong discussions and use it as an example.
yeah, that's probably a good idea. Nothing immediately comes to mind for like a good debate tree, uh, like in terms of my recent context. Um,
You could also go start a debate with someone. You only need like a few back and forths to have a stuff to put in a tree.
yep, yeah. Wondering is like a more social debate, like when people talk about like a community wrestling with an issue. Um, does it work? Are they easier or harder to do? I imagine they're harder, typically, and that they're less organized. And there's more context management.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Do you mean like there's more than two people in the discussion?
Yeah, like when there's a pivotal moment in the future of a community. So I can think of like a really uh, like one that was quite disruptive. Was in uh, 2015, I think, predominantly. Um, there was the block size debate in the Bitcoin community, or that's how it was sort of referred to as. And there were multiple different options, um, and multiple different. So it started out with like a simple binary sort of option, and then people were like successively engineering more and more complex, not necessarily more and more complex solutions, but different solutions to it. Um, and broadly speaking, there ended up being two camps. But that was like quite a lengthy and toxic debate. Um, it I mean, it sort of yeah, it made me really reconsider the way that I viewed the community, and the authority figures within the community.
Yeah, in general, the more people in the debate, the harder it is to make a tree or organize it in any manner. It tends to be more
Yep,
chaotic and too many things going on at once.
yep, yeah, that sort of makes sense. Um, yeah, particularly when you get like factionalization going on. We have subcamps of subcamps. Um, yeah. Okay, then I can't think of anything particularly great in terms of my context. So maybe one of your less wrong discussions would be good.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Till next time, I'm going to finish off the RSP stuff and keep working through analyzing lies videos and the various texts, PDFs and stuff from there in the old emails.
Yeah, I had one more quick question.
hmm
So, a couple of weeks ago we talked about procrastination and motivation and so on. So that's been going better, I think.
Yeah, so the first half, I guess, of a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about a month ago, is what feels right. Like end of July. So I started for a bit trying to deliberately use some of my time to like do that sort of stuff as sort of a preventative measure, I guess. Um, I ended up doing that a bit more, or continuing that for a little while. Um, I mean, here's I can find really quickly when the last time I actually. So okay, yeah. So I started playing Fallout 76, and that was what 10 days ago was the last time I loaded that up. So and 15 hours all up on that. So I haven't, besides the only downtime has been like YouTube or social stuff. I haven't loaded up a game since then. Um,
Okay, yeah. So what I wanted to suggest was writing some notes about what you think was working, so that if you have trouble again, then you can go back to that to try to help with it.
yeah,
Because, yeah, I gave you a bunch of ideas, and I assumed some of them made a lot more difference than others. So having some notes about which ones those were, I think would be good.
yeah. I mean, it was sort of. I think at the end, I remember saying something like, I wanted to like solve the issue more fully or something, but then I was like worried that the issue would go away before I'd get to do that, and I realized that was silly. Um, but one of the things that I meant to do after that was that sort of thing, was to try and get down as much detail about what I could remember from the time. So yeah, a week and a half is better late than never, or 2 weeks or a month or whatever else. But yeah, I really should do that. I haven't done any journaling since we were talking about it either. Like I sort of stopped that either around that time or whatever else. I've got something from the 4th, but otherwise it's like mid-June, mid-July, like the 14th of thing. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's a good thing to
Okay,
do.
so I'll see you in 3 days.
Yep. See you next week.
Bye.